Okay, so we're going to go ahead and take off the fuse for the fuel pump control module. It's number 67 here, 20 amp. Alright, now we're going to start the car and then wait till it stalls out so we could get rid of all the fuel pressure. Okay, it's going to stall out pretty quick, and then crank it one more time just to get rid of all the fuel pressure. And that's it. Okay, after that we're going to unhook this fuel line from the fuel rail here. So just undo this metal clip here. And now we're just going to use a simple disconnect tool to get under it. Yeah, watch out, there is some fuel that's going to spray. So you get under it till it clicks, and then you can pull up. Okay, now we're just going to unhook the fuel line here and set it aside. You could block this off with like a rubber glove, just so dirt won't get into it. Okay, so the new intake comes with a new purge valve, so we're gonna disconnect this one here. Okay, now let's disconnect the map sensor in the back here. Okay, we're gonna take off this bolt here on the right side. For this bracket, it's a E10. Okay, now we're going to take off this bolt here. It's a 10 mil for the bracket here in the middle. Okay, now we're going to remove this clip here for the wiring harness. Okay, so if you're unsure what to remove, sometimes it'll happen. I'm just going to keep referencing the new intake to make sure I remove everything, and if some brackets are staying on, like this purge valve bracket, that I don't remove it for nothing. Okay, now we're going to remove this clip here that's on the purge valve bracket. This is the wiring harness for the throttle body. Okay, now we're going to remove the hose for the PCV valve. So there's a metal clip here. Okay, now we're going to pull it from the valve cover here. Okay, now we're going to set this to the side. Okay, now we're going to disconnect the connector for the throttle body. It's this one down here. Okay, now we're going to remove this connector right here for the Vvt Solenoid, just to give us more room. So there's a yellow tab under, you pull it, then you... Now we could remove this plastic bracket here to give us more room. We're going to unhook it from here to give us more room. There's another connector beside it we're going to take off. And another clip right here. Okay, we're going to take off this bracket here on the side to give us more room. It's also a E10. Okay, now we're going to disconnect all four fuel injectors. Watch those metal clips. One fell already, so be careful. Okay, so there's a intake hose that we need to take off. Sorry, a vacuum hose. It's this one right here. It's for the brake booster, I believe. So we got to pinch both sides Okay, so pinch the bottom and the top here. Then it pulls out. Okay, now we're just gonna unhook these two coolant hoses here. Okay, now let's take off this intake tube over here. Okay, now let's undo this coolant hose here. So we're going to take off the clamp first. Okay, this one's free. Just be careful because there's some coolant that's going to spill out. So be careful of that. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and take off the throttle body. It's 4 bolts. They're T30. Okay, there's one more coolant hose attached to the throttle body. So to make this easier, we're just going to remove it from the coolant reservoir here. It's just a clamp that we have easy access to. Okay, now take the whole throttle body and set it aside. Okay, before we start removing anything from on top, there's one bolt that we have to get from underneath. It's a E10, and it's holding the manifold from the bottom here. So we're gonna take it out first. Okay, we're gonna start removing the bolts for the intake manifold. They're E12, and there's 7 of them. So we'll start with here, the ones on the left. The one on top, all the way to the left, has a ground wire to it, so be careful of that. Okay, now it's ready to come out. There's one more connector. It's for the intake tuning valve. So it's hard to get, so we're gonna remove it from here. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and clean the mating surface for the intake manifold. So you could use a Scotch-Brite or just a paper towel with some brake cleaner. Okay, when you're done, it should look like this, nice and clean. You don't need to go super aggressive. Usually this stuff, the dirt comes off pretty easy. Okay, now we're going to start putting in the new intake manifold. We're going to line it up with, there's 2 plastic notches sticking out, one on each side. And they're going to correspond with the ones here, this hole over here, right above the alternator, and the other one's going to be all the way on the other side. Just kind of to give you an idea how to line it up and make sure it won't move. So we're going to start with these 2. Okay, so we're going to start with the small bolt on the bottom that we took off earlier. The E10 bolt. Okay, now we're going to start putting in the bolts for the intake manifold. So there's 7 of them. Okay, now let's start reconnecting everything. We'll start here with the connector for the tuning valve and the vacuum line for the brake booster. Okay, now let's reattach the brackets that are here. Okay, let's go ahead and put back the connectors for the fuel injectors, and don't forget the metal clips that go with it. Okay, don't forget that bracket with the 10mm bolt here. It also has the support for the brake line. Okay, now let's reattach the brake line. Be careful because there's some fuel that's going to come out. So take off the rubber cover here that they gave you. Now we're going to place this hook that was here. Okay, now let's go ahead and put back the throttle body. Be careful of the hose that's attached to it. So. Okay, before we put it in, this coolant hose, we're going to fish it under the purge valve. Because they have brackets here that they're going to sit on. Now don't forget the coolant hose that was here. Okay, now we could let the coolant hose rest on the intake manifold. Okay, now we're going to reattach it to the reservoir. Okay, one more thing before we put back the intake tube. Don't forget the PCV tube for the PCV valve. Okay, now let's put back the intake tube. If you don't remember which way it goes, this side with the ripples here, they go on the bottom towards the throttle body. Alright, we're all done. Just go ahead and make sure everything else is connected. All the connectors, all the vacuum hose. And then last step, we're going to take our fuse, number 67, we're going to put it back. That's it, we're all done. Let's start it up.